service begins, we ask you to take a moment now and please silence your cell phones. Can you hear me? Please silence your cell phones, pagers, and electronic devices. Our service will be starting momentarily. Thank you.
all so torn today. It's not just that we lost one of the good ones. We lost one of the best we will ever know. And so we gather to honor Fritz's life and his memory. In the end, death has come to him as it does to all of us. And death brings to our minds and hearts the common concerns and shared destiny of the whole human family. And we're drawn together today by emotions we feel so deeply. And we're reminded through Fritz and his legacy of the essential community that lies beneath the many divisions of humanity on earth. Our lives and the lives of those we loved, like Fritz, well, our lives are rooted in a profound mystery that at times like this is frankly past our understanding. In the face of eternity, we're made simple. And though we know our destiny is to tarry on earth but a little while, this time of separation brings us anguish and grief. Together, as Fritz would want us to do, may we bear this burden bravely. May we struggle together through the darkness with courage to find our way again.
Poem that, when thinking about Fritz's life, reminded me of him and all that he went through. It's one of my favorite poems. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, but life is a journey, a going, a growing from stage to stage, from childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom. From weakness to strength, or strength to weakness, and often back again. From health to sickness, and back we prayed to health again. From offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, and from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding. From fear to faith. From defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey, stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, but life is a journey made stage by stage, from birth to death to life everlasting. We also read in the book of Ecclesiastes, V'chol zman ve'et, v'chol chefetz tachat hashemayim, for everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak.
Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo exar, binot tesheyar bitzeni, al mei menuchot yenach aleini, nafshi eshovev yancheni b'maglei tzedek. למען שמו. גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות, לא אירא רע כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך המה ינעמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי. תשענת בשמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי. ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. A Psalm of David. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want, giving me repose in green meadows, leading me beside the still waters to revive my spirit, guiding me on the right path, for that is God's essence. Though I walk through a valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your staff and your rod comfort me. You prepare a banquet for me in the presence of my foes. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and kindness shall be my portion all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai forever.
This place is filled with Fritz stories. You are here because every single one of you has a connection to Fritz that is very strong, that is real, and does not end because we won't see him again. You all have a story. I could tell a Fritz story, but I'm not going to do that. I want to read with you, to share with you a poem that Fritz wrote. I don't know if you knew that he wrote. He was very succinct because he was at heart an engineer. So but in these few lines, you see who Fritz was. It's called The Essence. I am unlike any other person in the world. So are you. Everyone is the only one. All of us are grand, a magical moment of being. Once between two unfathomable eternities. Life is precious. Life is precarious. Why do so many waste so much of it in anger and pettiness? I want to live life fully, share it freely, love and be loved until I'm done.
My name is Shulamit Bristaki. I'm one of the Holocaust survivors, one of the past presidents. Please follow me when my term of office ended. I am very honored to speak on behalf of survivors. There are about 6 or 7 of us here coming.
You put this down.
I'm sorry. I apologize for technology here. I am very honored to be here. There are numerous Holocaust survivors coming from different countries: Greece, Poland, France, Czechoslovakia, and Poland and Lithuania. Each one of us has a story, but I specifically want to speak about Fritz. Fritz was one of the most wonderful human beings you ever want to know. A gentleman, first-class scholar, polite and courteous. I just want to share some of the experiences I had with him. He knew that I had some physical challenges and was always helpful when we would go to meetings. Do you have a ride home? Do you have a ride to the meetings or from the meetings? And I would like to share just specifically 2 experiences. Some years ago, we traveled to Germany for a meeting of the German organization called Action Reconciliation for Peace. I stayed an extra day because I was meeting somebody, and he took care of my suitcase, and the last time I saw my suitcase was back in Pittsburgh, and he took me home. And on a bit of a funny side, which I received permission from his daughter to share, when he was celebrating his 90th birthday a few years ago, I wanted to honor him, and we went to the Style restaurant on Moray Avenue, and we had a wonderful lunch. He took some of the food also for Goldie. A few weeks later, I had dinner with some friends of mine in the same restaurant, and as we were leaving, walks in this gentleman, looked like Fritz, his height, his hair, demeanor, and personality, and I was so happy to see him. Look like he gained maybe a little bit of weight. And I approached him and said, "Fritz, I'm so happy to see you. Looks like you are doing better." And I gave him a big hug. When I came home, I called Goldie. I said, "Goldie, I was so happy to see Fritz." She said, "That was not Fritz." Thank you. May his soul rest in peace.
Thank you, everyone, so much for being with us today. Opa always said that he was happiest when the whole family, especially the 4 grandchildren, were together. So the 4 of us, Sarah, Claire, Elise, and I, put together some memories and thoughts to share with all of you today in honor of our amazing grandfather. Although I call him Opa, he has many other names as well. Sarah, Claire, and Elise call him Pop, and Aunt Marcy calls him Fot. My dad calls him Dad, Nenny calls him Hun, and all the grand dogs call him Woof. On one family vacation to Ocean City, I decided to come up with one unified name that made it much easier to refer to him, O Papitsada Ruffadin. For the rest of the speech, I will refer to him as O Papitsada Ruffadin instead of Opa. Actually, we might not have time for that, so I'll stick to Opa. To put it simply, Opa was our hero. He was brave, kind, and selfless. He was incredibly resilient, all the while staying positive and supplying his trademark witty humor. And although he was one of the most remarkable people we'll ever know, he was also unfailingly modest. In fact, while hearing this, he would likely listen quietly, half smile, half shrug his shoulders, and then say something to deflect the attention off of him. We were all impacted by this amazing man. Today, we want to honor him by sharing some of our fondest memories. Our favorite week of the year growing up was visiting Nenny and Opa in Pittsburgh. Although the 4 of us didn't always visit together, we discovered that we shared many similar memories of our amazing Pittsburgh trips. Some highlights for all of us included going to the Science Museum and Sports Works, exploring downtown Pittsburgh and taking the incline, going for long walks through Forest Hills that left us winded but didn't faze Opa even in his 80s, playing mini golf and enjoying great meals, which inevitably ended with blizzards from Dairy Queen. After all, he did teach us that dessert goes in a separate stomach. But no week was complete without a day at Kennywood. One particular memory stands out for Sarah. It was the summer that Pitfall opened, which at the time was the tallest drop tower in the world. It pulled you slowly up to the top, held you there for what seemed like forever while your feet dangled, then let you plummet straight down. Since it was a new ride, the line was very long. Sarah asked Opa, "Are you sure you want to go on this ride?" There certainly weren't any other people even close to his age in line. And she knew that they could ride the racer 10 times in the same amount of time they would be waiting in line for Pitfall. His response was an enthusiastic, "Yep." So they waited in line for over an hour to go on that 10-second ride. As it ended, Sarah looked over at Opa, and he was grinning from ear to ear. The hundreds of people still nervously waiting in line watched as a small white-haired man, as happy as could be, exited past them. They could not believe it. Some actually left the line to come over to Opa and shake his hand. They were in complete awe, an effect Opa seemed to have on many people. Rainy days were just as fun. One of our favorite indoor games to play was bucket ball. We arranged all of Nenny and Opa's buckets at the foot of the basement stairwell and then threw a ball to the top of the stairs, letting it bounce back down. The smaller the bucket it landed in, the more points you got. I recently found an email that Opa sent me while I was an undergrad, where he suggested that I play bucket ball in the stairwell of Yale's Stacks, one of the largest libraries in the world. I may have to do just that next time I'm in town. Sometimes we would play mini golf at home too. We would use our legs for clubs, and the hole was an overturned bucket. Opa was the fearless leader of many vacations the family took together. Elise especially remembers how fearless he was on our beach trips to Ocean City. A family tradition was jumping the waves together, but Opa took it a step further. We would often watch in terror as, when the largest waves arrived, Opa would go down to the water, turn his back to the ocean, and let the water crash against him, all while laughing with glee. It was as if he was challenging the ocean. Even when the waves knocked him over, he would bounce back onto his feet with a huge grin, ready for the next wave, leaving us baffled every time. Resilient, right? He lived life to the fullest. His zest for life and love for nature and physical activity is something we learned from him since we were young kids. Not many people get to say that they went spelunking with their grandfather, but into the caves of West Virginia we'd go every year, and up mountains and down waterfalls, and rarely on the well-beaten path. Age was just a number for Opa. Every year he defied what a 75, 80, 85-year-old should be able to do. We always knew we had the best grandfather in the world, but it took a little longer for us to realize how truly amazing he was. For me, it started when he read his book out loud to me soon after it was published. I remember he had some hesitation in reading it to me because of the heavy content. After a particularly graphic scene in a liberated camp, he expressed regret in sharing it with me, saying he should have skipped over that part. He wanted to protect me and the whole family from the horrors that he and others went through. But he also recognized that the best way to prevent more suffering was to share his story with others. His message has now reached thousands of people through talks he gave at schools, both our schools and countless others, and through his book, where he recounts escaping Germany and later returning to fight as a member of the U.S. Army. We are very grateful that his words will forever be with us. If Opa had not shared his story, you would never know what he had been through. He was one of the most warm, generous people you could ever know. He always found the good in people and the value in every circumstance. One of Claire's fondest memories is the trip we took with Opa to his hometown of Constance. We had the distinct privilege of attending a ceremony where the city of Constance honored Opa and his family with engraved stones, Stolpersteine, that were placed in his sidewalk outside the family's apartment. It's one of many gestures his hometown showed him in reparation for the atrocities his family suffered. His willingness to accept those gestures is testament to the size of his heart. One of the most important lessons Opa taught us was not to be a bystander. He clearly embodied this message in his life. His decades of volunteering inspired us from a young age to get involved and be active. He taught us to use our voices to stick up for ourselves, stick up for others, stick up for what's right. But Opa also showed us that making a difference isn't always about being loud. He quietly touched the lives of thousands of people. It was remarkable how he always unselfishly listened to others, and once he understood their perspective, he would help them in any way he could. He did this through his work with Rehabilitation Institute, PACE, Boy Scouts, tutoring, Pittsburgh Holocaust Center, the twinning program here, just to name a few. And it was really great getting to meet so many of you that he touched today. He had a particular dedication to helping people in their youth, perhaps to make up for the unfair one he had. Opa is the definition of a survivor, an inspiration for all of us. If we could all be even a fraction as humble, brave, and kind as he was, the world would be a much better place. We were incredibly lucky to have him as our grandfather. Opa, thank you for the beautiful memories. Thank you for everything you did and everything you taught us. Thank you for being such a role model in our lives and the lives of many others. Thank you for being our hero, and thank you for being you. We love you, O Papa Tsada Rofudin.
Marcy and I have a single speech to give. The idea is we're going to be taking turns speaking and crying, and instead of us trying to do both at the same time, which can be difficult. First, I want to thank all of you for coming here today to help us remember and honor our father. It's very heartwarming to see all of you here. We'd especially like to thank Suzanne, Sholomit, Mimi, Rabbi Gibson, the grandkids, and the others for their thoughtful words and music. It's been perfect this morning. So perfect that Marcy and I have very little to add. One thing we thought that we could do is read to you something that Marcy wrote to my dad a couple years ago as his health started to decline. And it really sums up everything that we feel about him.
Dad, I couldn't ask for a better father. You have...
My turn to cry.
Thanks. You have taught me, by example, to live life with grace, humility, love, enjoyment, and joy, even while dealing with extremely difficult and traumatic circumstances. From escaping the Holocaust to living with your current health challenges, you have always maintained a positive outlook on life. I will continue to aspire to do the same. Love you very much.
We've been very grateful and touched by all the wonderful remarks that we've received about our dad and from all the people whose lives he impacted. And these words from Marcy's husband, Jim, mirror what so many of us thought and said about him. I never heard him utter a bad word about anyone and never heard him raise his voice. He was kind, patient, and he would help anyone he could. Thank you, Dad, for showing me how to be a better human being.
If I had to choose the one person who had the greatest positive influence on my life, it would be my dad.
We may feel right now like we have a large hole in our hearts, but we also have much to be thankful for. We're thankful that our dad lived to 92 and that he was amazingly active and sharp and healthy for all but the last couple of years. We're thankful that our dad was able to care for our mom, especially when they were both at the Bristol. We're thankful that he was able to see all his grandchildren grow to adults, and so he could see how much they love him and are inspired by him. And we're thankful that he chose to speak out about his experiences during the Holocaust and thus became an inspiration to thousands of people and a role model to them as well.
While going through his papers recently, we found a farewell letter he wrote to all of us several years ago during one of his health crises. In it, he asked that we be good to each other and help each other out, especially helping our mom, Goldie.
So, we hope that all of us here who were touched by our dad can do these things to honor his memory, to be kind to each other, to help others out, and also to stand up for others wherever you see injustice.
An extraordinary man, Arthur Ashe, once said, "True heroism is remarkably sober, very undramatic. It is not the urge to surpass all others at whatever cost, but the urge to serve others at whatever cost." I don't know if Arthur Ashe ever met Fritz Ottenheimer, but these words could so easily have been written about him. Fritz, the quiet hero. Fritz, remarkably sober and very undramatic. Fritz, who served individuals, the Jewish people, and all of humanity. He served us all by his hard work, his kind spirit, but more than anything else, his powerful witness to the evil of Nazism and the strength it took to stand up to it. Who was this man? Who was this quiet hero to his family, his friends, to all of us who loved him so fiercely? Let us listen to his own words from his autobiography, Escape and Return. I was born in Germany, so were my parents, my grandparents, my ancestors as far back as I can trace them. My parents, Clara and Ludwig, were married in 1921 and settled down in the beautiful little town of Konstanz. My sister Ilse was born in 1922. I came along in 1925. Our family had a menswear store in the center of Konstanz. We were not wealthy. We did not own a car or a house, but we lived comfortably at a time when many others were struggling to keep afloat. I was 8 years old when Hitler came to power. 8-year-olds do not normally get too excited about a change in a nation's leadership, but even I was painfully aware of Hitler's arrival. I could see parades and hear speeches nearly every day. Every German radio station presented fanatical tirades all day, condemning the Jews and other enemies of Germany. Anyone caught listening to a foreign station was taken away by the secret police, the Gestapo, and never seen again. Many of us have heard Fritz tell the rest of this chapter of his life in his own voice, how things got successively worse with the passage of the Nuremberg laws, how things reached a boiling point at Kristallnacht in 1938, how Fritz heard the explosion and watched the burning of his community's beloved synagogue, how his father Ludwig was arrested by the Gestapo and spent 3 months in Dachau. Fritz writes that when his father returned, he looked so emaciated, his family was shocked. Fritz writes he could not have endured even another week. Then, despite unending bureaucratic hurdles, the family made its way to America, to New York. Fritz began studying English and was teased without mercy over his inability to speak properly, although he learned grammar very quickly. The laughter stopped when his classmates were surprised that he was only one of 4 students in their school accepted to the Bronx High School of Science, then one of the premier public schools in the nation. As he wrote, "Do they still think I'm a Dummkopf?" After completing Bronx Science High with high grades, he immediately went to sign up for the Army, where he was promptly rejected due to a pilonidal cyst on his derriere. He writes, "It was only a minor inconvenience, but now it would keep me out of the Army. Somehow this did not please me. It seemed dishonest." So Fritz endured the minor surgery, recovered, and then entered the Army. In his book, you can read about his exploits in the war and its aftermath, how he successfully interrogated both capos and SS officers and determined when they were lying about the terrible acts they were guilty of. His German was perfect, and his honesty and clear-sightedness made it almost impossible to deceive him. When he returned home, Fritz wanted to get away from New York, which he found overwhelming and oppressive. So he made his way far, far away to the land of Stillwater, Oklahoma, to study engineering. Even though there was still anti-Semitism in that state, Fritz disarmed everyone he met with his kindness, decency, intellect, and hard work. He earned his Bachelor of Science degree in Industrial Engineering, and later he'd earn his master's degree from Carnegie Tech. After earning his degree, he came back to New York, but then took a job with the Blaw-Knox Company of Pittsburgh in piping design in their chemical plant division. So he moved here in short order. He also found a gregarious roommate, Henry Gruen, with whom to share an apartment. Family lore says that in 1952, Henry got Fritz to accompany him to a party, each with a blind date. Fritz's was a lovely young woman named Goldie Baru. Fritz thought she was delightful and wanted to see her again. And given that Goldie's family was Orthodox, their first date was Shabbat services at Paul Zedek. Later that year, they were married in the same synagogue. Fritz and Goldie brought 2 extraordinary children into the world, Marcy and Dan. Marcy, as you've heard, remembers a father whom she wanted to please, who supported her and never, ever raised his voice. Raising an eyebrow was more than enough to convey disapproval. Dan was a freer spirit, and even then, Fritz didn't raise his voice to him except on the nature walk when he was 6, when Dan seemed to go out of his way to step in the dog poo. Fritz moved in with his work. He moved from his work at Blaw-Knox to the work at Westinghouse, and there over the decades, he was involved in cutting-edge work in both nuclear and bioengineering projects. But despite his keen scientific mind and his aptitude for hard work, he did not give in to workaholism. He never forgot what really mattered in life, and that was his family, his beloved Goldie, Marcy and Dan, and then their children. As you've heard, he loved the outdoors and was drawn to caving. Marcy says, although he was never really an athlete, he was incredibly agile and could get through the tightest of rock spaces, even in the dark. He especially loved exploring Seneca Cave in West Virginia and took his family there to share this unique family experience. Fritz saw it as a way to experience the miracles of God's world and to test himself at the same time. As Marcy and Dan put it, Fritz never saw a challenge or even a setback as anything more than an adventure, a chance to learn or do something new. Besides caving, Fritz and Goldie enjoyed square dancing and spending time with their friends in the neighborhood of Forest Hills and here at Temple Sinai. On his own, as you've heard, he volunteered with the Boy Scouts, which fed his appetite for the outdoors as well as being with his son. He also offered to help with disabled children at the Rehab Institute and the Pace School. After his retirement, Fritz took advantage of many opportunities. He took more than 60, count them, 60 courses of PIT to keep his mind sharp, and became deeply involved in the Holocaust Center and became an active participant in their Speakers Bureau. He continued his leadership right here at Temple Sinai, where he chaired our worship committee and was a charter member of the Shabbat Morning Minyan. As many of you know, he had the opportunity to travel back to Constance several times in later years. And as you just heard, this last trip was paid for by the city of Constance for the dedication of the Stolpenstein plaque commemorating their home. Fritz was a wonderful friend and a dear companion to all who entered his circle. Although he was often out of the house doing volunteer work or Holocaust presentations, he remained devoted to Goldie and helped her through all of her medical challenges. He learned to cook, and I'm told that he actually turned out a very fine poached salmon. Fritz loved to eat as well, and he was never shy about nibbling from the leftover food on his children or grandchildren's plates. And he developed, as you just heard, this novel theory about how there was always room for dessert because the food would be channeled into his second stomach. He adored these 4 grandchildren, and they looked up to him with love, pride, and adoration. Fritz had a long-time connection with the Action Reconciliation Program, which brought young German men and women to Pittsburgh to partner with Holocaust survivors and work for tolerance, forgiveness, and understanding. Through these efforts, Fritz came to meet the incomparable Susanna Ortner, the brilliant clarinetist who shares her soul music with us this day. Susanna, like all of us, came to love Fritz and was delighted and honored to work on a deeply moving presentation of Fritz's words and her own music to evoke the spirit of love and endurance which outlasted the Holocaust itself. And we are so honored that you made the trip from New Orleans to be with us today, to share music in his honor one more time, to bring Fritz's spirit to life on the wings of klezmer's song, an achingly beautiful melody. In his Holocaust presentations with Susanna, as well as when he simply spoke on his own, you did not hear rage or passion or anger. You did not hear him wail or gnash his teeth. He told the story quietly, simply, without embellishment. To Fritz, the story was the message, and the message was simple. Hate kills, love heals. If you needed to over-dramatize it, the core lesson would be lost. So Fritz was never overdramatic. He won your heart and mind with simplicity, dignity, honor, and integrity, gifts sorely lacking in our midst today. I was blessed to be his rabbi for going on 30 years. When I came to Temple Sinai, he tried to guide me through the thicket of expectations awaiting me here. I eagerly sought his advice, even when I didn't agree with him. And that was the other thing that made Fritz so amazing. You could disagree with him, even about something you thought was important, and he wouldn't hold it against you. He'd say something like, well, if you want to do it that way, I guess you will. Hope it works out. And if it didn't, Fritz was more than willing to get back to work with you. No grudges, ever. I depended on Fritz and came to desire his respect and acceptance as much as from any adult I've ever known. And I know that so many of you feel the same way. A smile or a thumbs up from Fritz could make your day. Heck, it could make your week. Countless school children came to look at Fritz as though he were a member of their family, a third grandfather, someone you could trust, who was telling you what was real. For all his work promoting tolerance as well as volunteering on behalf of children, all doing this, he was a finalist for the prestigious Jefferson Award a few years ago. It was a sign of the incredible caring and regard in which the entire Pittsburgh community holds Fritz Ottenheimer. Now, if we're honest, we know these last few years were difficult, almost impossible for Fritz. He submitted to a dangerous heart operation just shy of his 90th birthday and suffered terribly from the effects of the procedure post-operatively. And yet, Fritz fought gamely on. He withstood each procedure that followed, each test, always hoping to regain his strength and rigorous schedule of appearances and activities. Although Fritz did make it to temple for a few Shabbat services, it was very hard, and it took so much out of him. Even before the operation, he was moving very slowly, but that did not stop him from meeting with every bar and bat mitzvah child here to do Holocaust twinning, to come to my house to have Shabbat dinner with our 11th and 12th graders, and to have wonderful conversations. His will could never be stopped. Only his body could not endure. And now, he's gone. He is at peace, and we are torn. Oh, how the mighty have fallen, David bewails King Saul. It may seem strange to mourn so deeply over a man in his 10th decade, but he was a hero to so many of us here today. He lived a life of head, heart, and hand, and never backed down from the challenges life and history threw at him. I loved this man, and already I miss him desperately. I loved his sweetness and his humility. I loved his devotion to family, faith, and friends. I loved his knowing smile and his infectious laughter and his deep, deep caring that shone from every pore. I loved this man who both taught me and accepted me, molded and encouraged me, who demonstrated more courage in one moment of history than many of us will ever display in our lifetimes. We wish him peace and rest, which he has so richly earned. And for ourselves, we wish that his life be our legacy, his remembrance our joy. We hope to repay our debt to him by living his virtues in our lives. We can accomplish this first by caring for Goldie and Marcy and Dan and Sarah and the grandkids, Sarah, Claire, Elise, and David. And then we can extend ourselves for others as he did so often and so well. And finally, we can show our moral courage by standing up for what we know is right and stand up for those vulnerable, too vulnerable to fight for themselves. Fritz Ottenheimer was a true hero, a quiet and undramatic kind, yet a genuine hero, one whose words and acts will be remembered long after we lay his remains in the earth. May we act as he would, care as he would, share as he would, live and love as he would. Then not only will we live better lives, but the essence of Fritz will never die. Never, ever die. Amen.
Il male rachamim shochein bamromim hametzei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashchina במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת שמעון בן אליעזר וקלרה שהלך לעולמו בגן עדן די מנוחתו. ענה בעל הרחמים, אז תראהו בשאת כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו, אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Fritz Ottenheimer, Shimon ben Eliezer Veclara, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful One, may we ask that he find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace. And let us all say, Amen.
As we complete our service here in the Liebov Sanctuary, we'll be proceeding to the Temple Sinai Memorial Park in Plum Borough for the service of burial, and then gathering here again for the Seudat Havra'ah, the meal of comfort, where I know the family would love to have a more relaxed conversation than simply standing in a visitation line. Shiva will be tonight at 7 o'clock here in this room, also tomorrow night here in this room, and then on Tuesday night at Heritage, led by Mimi Botkin. We thank Mimi, we thank Shulamit, and we thank Susanna for all you have done to help honor his life by your presence, your beautiful words, and your music. Will the pallbearers please come forward now?